I remember the night it happened like it was yesterday, even though it feels like it's been years. My parents had always told me monsters were just stories, things to make kids behave. But that night, I learned how wrong they were. I was about 11, old enough to stay up a little later on weekends, watching TV in the living room. My parents had just gone to bed, and the house was quiet. I'd been hearing strange sounds for a few days, but I thought it was just the house settling. You know how old houses can be, creaking and groaning like they're alive. But that night, the sounds were different. At first, it was the soft shuffle of something moving in the hall outside my door. A slow, deliberate drag, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. I pulled the blanket over my head, telling myself it was nothing, probably the wind or an animal outside. But then, there was a noise, a sharp, low thud followed by a groan. I froze, straining to hear, trying to convince myself it was just a nightmare. But then the whispering started. It was soft at first, like a breath on the back of my neck. I sat up, my heart racing, eyes darting to the corner of my room where the shadows seemed thicker than normal. The whispering turned to a voice, low and guttural, a voice that didn't belong to anyone I knew. Subscribe for part 2. I remember the night it happened, part 2. I could feel it, like a weight on my chest, pressing me down. I don't know why I didn't scream. Maybe I was too terrified to move. But then, there was a sound, louder this time, a knock at my door. It wasn't a polite knock, like someone asking to come in. It was a demand. A heavy thud that echoed through the house, sending a ripple of dread through me. "Mom," I called out, my voice trembling. But there was no answer, only silence. I jumped out of bed and crept to the door, my hand hovering over the doorknob. I wanted to call for my parents, but something stopped me. Deep down, I knew something was wrong. I had always felt safe at home, but that night, that feeling was gone. I pushed the door open just enough to peek through. The hallway was empty. The lights in the living room were off, but I could see the faint glow of moonlight slipping through the curtains. The house felt so much bigger at that moment, so much darker. I wanted to go to my parents' room, to make sure they were okay. But when I stepped into the hall, I heard it again. A dragging sound, soft but unmistakable. I followed it, barely breathing. As I passed their bedroom door, I stopped. There was a figure standing at the foot of their bed. At first, I thought it was my dad, but then I saw the shape, the long, gangly arms and the two thin legs. Subscribe for part 3. I remember the night it happened. It wasn't a man, it wasn't even human. Its face was pale, stretched too tight over its skull, with dark eyes that seemed to suck in the light. Its mouth was twisted into something that looked like a grin, but it wasn't a smile. It was hungry, and I knew, with every fiber of my being, that it was waiting for something. Waiting for me. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't move. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the creature, frozen in place like a mouse caught in the gaze of a snake. And then, just as I thought I couldn't bear it anymore, it turned its head slowly toward me. I could hear its breath, heavy and wet, like something alive and dead at the same time. I didn't know how I made it back to my room. 1 second, I was standing in the hallway, and the next, I was slamming the door shut, my heart pounding in my ears. I pressed my back against it, trying to make myself as small as possible. I heard the footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming closer. The thing was coming for me. Subscribe for part 4. I remember the night it happened, part 4. But then, just as quickly as it had started, the house went silent again. I stayed there, trembling, for what felt like hours. Every time I tried to call out, the words stuck in my throat. It wasn't until the first light of dawn crept through the window that I dared to look out. I don't know what I expected to find, but it certainly wasn't the empty silence of my parents' room. When I finally summoned the courage to go inside, I saw them, my mother and father, lying in their bed, their bodies twisted unnaturally, their faces frozen in a final expression of terror. But it wasn't the sight of their lifeless bodies that haunts me the most. It's the small detail I hadn't noticed at first, the faint impression of hands around their throats, as though something had been holding them down. Watching them struggle. And then, as I stood there in the doorway, I felt it, a presence. That same weight, that same oppressive dread from the night before, settling behind me like a shadow. I turned around slowly, and there, just at the edge of my vision, I saw it. The thing that had killed them. It was standing in the corner of my room again, watching me. And it was smiling. Subscribe for more.